In 2015, Toby Fox released Undertale, a game that became a landmark for the way it treated player agency. It was a story of optimism, where a concept called determinism was a powerful force. If you were kind, the world became a utopia, and if you were cruel, the world was destroyed. You were the master of the script, and your choices affected everyone. But in his 2018 follow-up Deltarune, Fox took that hope and systematically dismantled it. We are going to look at how Deltarune uses the mechanics of a puppet and a player to explore existentialist philosophy, from the burden of being a hero to the terrifying realization that some scripts cannot be broken. The story begins in Hometown, a peaceful, ordinary community where you play as Chris, the only human in a town populated by monsters. During a mundane school day, Chris and the school bully Susie are sent into the supply closet to get chalk. Instead of a closet, they find a gateway to a dark world, a surreal, magical realm where everyday objects come to life as sentient darkners, or monsters. There they meet Ralsei, a prince who reveals a grand prophecy. A human, a monster, and a prince must team up to seal dark fountains that are threatening to tip the balance between light and dark. If they fail, the world could be consumed by a cataclysmic event known as the Roaring. For a brief overview of the three heroes, we have Chris, the human, who is the quiet protagonist and the leader of our group. While Chris is the one physically moving through the world, they are directed by the soul, or the player, creating a constant, silent tension between the character's story and the player's control. Then there is Susie the monster, an axe-wielding brawler who initially hates the idea of being a hero. She is the wild card of the group, often refusing to follow the player's mercy commands in the early chapters, preferring to smash problems rather than talk through them. And then Ralsei the prince, a kind, pacifistic Darkner who is the ultimate rule follower. He is the one who explains the mechanics of the world and the importance of the prophecy, acting as the group's moral guide. To understand the weight of Deltarune, we have to understand the themes that Fox has created in Undertale. In Undertale, the player's will was the primary mover of the universe. In Deltarune, we are introduced to an alternate reality of these characters where we follow Chris, a human who discovers a dark world, which is a parallel dimension where everyday objects become sentient. Unlike its predecessor, Deltarune is built on a foundation of fatalism. From the very beginning, the game explicitly tells the player that your choices don't matter. So, if Undertale was a playground for free will, Deltarune is a cage designed to show its limits. In Deltarune's intro, the game begins in a void. Then, a flickering white heart appears, and a voice invites you to construct a vessel, or an avatar, allowing you to pick its favorite food, color, and personality. You are performing the ultimate act of creation, defining a life before it even begins. Then, the screen goes dark. The voice returns, colder this time, saying, "No one can choose who they are in this world." And then, your creation is deleted. You are forced into the body of Chris. This is a brutal rejection of the idea that existence precedes essence. Usually, we exist first and then define ourselves. Here, the essence of the hero is a pre-made cage, and we are simply the engine forced into it. Once the player character, or the soul, accepts Chris as the main character in the story, we have full control over them. Chris is not able to make any decisions without us, and as Chris is aware of our existence, they try to have little personality, letting us make all their decisions and emotions. Throughout the story, we see Chris struggling against our control. In silent sequences, usually when Chris is alone, they will physically rip out the soul, the player, out of their chest and throw it into a birdcage. While this gives Chris a moment of independence, they move like they are in pain. I think this is a perfect illustration of Sartre's idea that hell is other people. He meant that we are caged by how others look at us and define us. Chris is a subject being treated like an object by the player. However, the tragedy is that Chris seems to need the soul to function. To be free is to be in agony. To be a puppet is to have a purpose. Chris is trapped between a meaningful cage and a painful freedom. The freedom of giving up the role of being a a hero in the story would leave Chris as a meaningless person. While Chris struggles silently, their classmate Susie represents the rejection of the script. The world of Deltarune is governed by a prophecy mentioned before, a roadmap for the future. Rouse, a prince of the Dark World, is a fatalist who believes the prophecy is absolute. However, Susie smashes the scripts. When she finds a pillar of stone predicting a tragedy, she destroys it and declares that it won't happen. It feels like a moment of radical freedom, but a lingering tension remains despite her defiance. The chapters end exactly where the prophecies say they would, so it raises a haunting question. Is Susie's rebellion a genuine break from fate? Or is the rebel in the story just another role the script has already been accounted for? Toby Fox is known in both Undertale and Deltarune for using leitmotifs, or musical motifs related to people or ideas. In Deltarune, one of the most famous motifs is the freedom motif. The game's secret bosses use this theme, and I will be focusing specifically on two of the bosses, Jevil and Spamton. They represent ways to react to learning your life is not in your own control. Jevil is a Joker card from a deck of cards brought to life, literally being the card that can be anything. Jevil realized his world was a game and chose absurdism. Camus suggested that if life is meaningless, the only way to deal with it is to become so absolutely free that your existence is an act of rebellion. Jevil treats his jail cell as a playground. He concludes that if nothing matters, he can do anything. He has accepted the absurdity and found a strange, chaotic joy in it. Jevil's situation in prison reminded me of Camus' Stranger, where in the ending of the book, despite the protagonist getting the death penalty, if he had to relive his life, he wouldn't do it any other way, accepting the prison, though it is unclear if he would be considered a fatalist. Spamton, however, represents the pain of freedom. He is a glitched salesman who speaks in broken language and is always talking about becoming a big shot. Spamton starts out as a small puppet-like monster, but whenever he gains immense power, his body is literally hanging from puppet strings. Spamton knows he's being controlled, and it terrifies him. He desperately seeks freedom, which he equates with money and power, only to realize the strings are still there. He represents the idea of bad faith, the desire to have someone else hold the strings because the weight of choosing for yourself is too much to bear. He doesn't want to be a person. He wants to have full control, a role that is another kind of string. This leads to the most unsettling realization Deltarune offers. In most games, the player is the hero, but in Deltarune, you are simply the one who controls the hero. We are the reason Chris can't speak for themselves. We are the reason they rip their own heart out in the middle of the night. Whether we play as a pacifist or force them to attack the enemies they run into, we are still the one holding the strings. Deltarune leaves us with a question that sits heavy in the silence between chapters. If the ending is truly fixed, if the prophecy will march on regardless of our determination, then why are we here? Does the way we treat these characters actually matter if we are the ones who trapped them in the story to begin with? So to conclude, perhaps the only real agency left in this world isn't in winning the game, but in acknowledging the pain of the person we are forcing to play it. And if playing the game causes suffering, maybe it's best to not play it at all, similar to Legati's ideas.